So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be doing more factoring. So we're going to continue this section on factoring these quadratics, these quadratic equations. And these steps, these 5 main steps, are really going to be helpful in factoring these polynomial equations or expressions. In the homework, it's turning out like they're calling some of these an expression because it is an expression. It doesn't have an equal sign, so it's an expression. And they're also going to be the same because there's one or two that set it up as this thing equals something, and it's just equal to the factors. It's just saying the same thing. It just wants you to put the factors. So when we look at this first one here, we want to see, is there a greatest common factor? Because steps 1 is a greatest common factor. Is there a greatest common factor between 8x squared, negative 56x, and 48? 8. 8 will go into all 3 terms. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to factor out 8. Well, 8 factored out of 8x squared, or 8 divided by, if we divide 8x squared by 8, we're left with x squared. Minus, well, 56 divided by 8 would be 7x plus 48 divided by 8 would be 6. So really what we're doing is we're dividing each one of these terms by 8. And when we do that, we get this here. 8 times x squared minus 7x plus 6. Well, what we do next is we are going to write our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces, because we finished step 1, now we're moving on to step 2. And that's all step 2 is. Step 2 is just writing 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces in each. And we need the 8, because that, again, that is our scalar, what we call a scalar. It's what we're multiplying everything by. It's what we factored out. So we need it in our answer. So we're good with steps 1 and 2. Any questions on this here so far? Step 3. Step 3. We're looking at the constant term. Is the constant term positive or negative? It's positive. Since it's positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. And the sign of the middle term is negative, so both of our signs are negative. It's negative and a negative. So it's really based off of the constant term. Here, kind of the rule that I've set up and done is just if the constant term is positive, the signs are the same. Because here, 2 numbers that multiply together to give me 6, give me positive 6. Well, a positive and a positive gives me a positive. Multiplied together gives me a positive. A negative and a negative give me a positive also. Yes? So either they're both going to be positive or they're both going to be negative. Now, with the middle term, it's kind of we saw yesterday, to get that, it's really combining the multiplication of the first and last and the middle 2, and then adding or subtracting. Well, a negative minus a negative is a negative, yes? A positive plus a positive is a positive. So it works out that if this is positive and this is negative, they're both negative. Positive and positive would be both positive. It kind of tells us what they would be. So any other questions on steps 1 through 3, anything we've done so far? Step number 4, we need to find the factors of the first and third term. Well, the first term is x squared, yes? Well, the only factors of x squared are x and x. We're just going to put the variable down. Now, the other set of factors is going to come from 6. We're going to have 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. So which ones do we want to try first? 1 and 6 or 2 and 3? Let's try 2 and 3. So we plug those in, and now we're going to just check it. So we're going to multiply the outer two and the inner two, the outer two and the middle two. Well, x times negative 3 is going to be what? Negative 3x. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x, and negative 3x minus 2x is negative 5x. Is that what we wanted? No, we wanted negative 7x. So we could flip the 2 and 3, but would that change anything? No, it'd be the same thing. So we'll use the other factors, 6 and 1. So if the number in front of x had been something different than 1 and 1 or being the same, switching it would do something, but here, because the number in front of x is the same, it doesn't change anything. X times negative 1 this time will give us negative x. Negative 6 times x will give us negative 6x. 1 minus 6, or x minus, negative x minus 6 is negative 7x. And that's what we wanted. That is, so that tells us that 8 times x minus 6 times x minus 1 is the correct answer. That is the correct answer. Questions on this here? Now we could this here is also the correct answer. So we can switch it because multiplication works in any order. Order does not matter in multiplication. Questions on any of this here? Let's look at this next one here. 14x squared plus 31x plus 15. So the first thing we're looking for is what? A greatest common. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? No. So since there's not a greatest common factor, we move from step 1 to step 2. Step 2 is what? With 3 spaces. 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. That satisfies step 2. Step 3, find the sign. The sign of the constant term is? So the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term, which is? So we have positive and positive. So any questions on step 1 through 3? Anything we've done so far? Are we good with this here? Well, factors of the first and third term. That's what we need to find next. Factors of the first and third term. Well, the first term has x squared, yes? So we know for sure we're going to have x and x. We're always going to have x and x because that's the only way we get to x squared. Factors of 14. 1 times 14 and 2 times 7, and that's it. 15 is what? Yep, 3 times 5 and 1 times 15. So for 14, do we want to use 1 and 14 or 2 and 7? 1 and 14. We'll call this one 14 and we'll call the other one 1. For 15, do we want to use 1 and 15 or 3 and 5? 1 and 15. Let's do 15 and 1. So we just picked those. Now we check it to see if it works. If it does, we're done. If not, we're going to have to change some things. 14x times 1 is 15 times x is plus 15x. 14 plus 15 is that what we wanted? No. So that's not it. So what can we do? We can switch some things around, can't we? So what can we switch? We can switch the 14 and the 1 or the 15 and the 1. 15 and the 1. 15 and 1 might be a little bit easier. 1, 15. 14 times 15. Is that going to be bigger than 31? Yeah, so we can just end that right there. Okay. Now the question is, do we want to switch out the 14 and 1 with its other factor or the 15 and 1? It doesn't matter. Which one do we want to try first? Do we want to switch to 2 and 7 or 3 and 5? Let's do 2 and 7. See if that helps. Okay, so that's good. So 7, 2x. And try it again. 7x times 15. 7 times 15. 7 times 5 is 35, so we get 105x. Well, that ain't going to cut it, is it? No, that's too big. Okay. So let's switch 15 and 1. Well, 7 times 1, it gives us 7x, yes? 15 times 2 is plus 30x, 37x. 15 and 1 did not work, did it? No. Okay, so now we need to switch to 3 and, well, 7 times 5 is what? Okay, well, we can stop there. 5 and 3. 7x times 3 is 21x, yes? 5 times 2x is plus, which is, and that's it. Sometimes it will take more than one check to see if it's correct. Now, the more of these you do, the easier it's going to be to see which ones are right, which ones you think are most likely going to be right. And it'll be easier to pick up on it as we do more of these. Any questions on how we did this one here? Are we feeling pretty comfortable with these? A little bit, kind of. Let's see here. I want to go with this one here. I want to do some more with the minus. I know we're skipping 2. Because we're on the top of the 3rd page. Top of the 3rd page. Front of the 2nd page. Top of the 3rd page. So the first thing, again, we always look for a greatest common factor. Is there a greatest common factor between these 3 terms? No. So we move on to step 2. 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Next thing we look for is sign. So the constant term is negative. So the signs are opposite. The signs are opposite. The signs are opposite. Because the only way we can get a negative number is if the signs are opposite when we multiply. That brings us to the 4th step, yes? Factors of the 1st and 3rd term. Well, the 1st term is 4x squared. Well, factors of x squared are x and x. Because that's the only way we get x squared is x times x. Factors of 4 are 1 and 4 and factors of 5. 5 and 1, 1 and 5. So we'll just put those down. Now, do we want to use 2 and 2 or 4 and 1? 2 and 2. 2x times negative 1 is negative 2x. 5 times 2x is plus, which gives us 8x. Is that what we wanted? No. Well, switching the 2's wouldn't do anything, would it? So I could switch 5 and 1. Now let's try that. Two x times negative 5 is negative 10x, yes? 1 times 2x is plus 2x. That gives us negative 8x. So we can't change 1 and 5, right? But I can change the x's to 1 and 4. Well, x times negative 5 is negative 5x. 1 times 4x is plus 4x, and we get negative x. That didn't work, did it? So let's switch the 1 and 5. Hopefully, that'll give us something a little different. X times negative 1 is negative x. 5 times 4 is plus 40x. We get positive 19x. That's what we wanted, yes? It's negative, yes? Yes, if you get the correct number but wrong sign, flip the signs. Flip the signs. Because if we redo this, this would be positive, this would be negative, and we get negative 19 because it'd be x minus 20x is negative 19x. Now, when we did it with 2x and 2x, because those were the same number for x, when we switched the 1 and 5, it was essentially the same thing as flipping the signs. Because 2x, 2 and 2, it doesn't change. Y'all can see that, yes? But here, when the first term is different and we get the correct number for the middle term but wrong sign, just change the signs. Just change the signs. Because if we just switch the 4 and 1 x and we switch the 4x and 1x, it would change the number. So when you get the correct middle term but wrong sign, flip the signs. It's going to be the easiest way to fix it. Questions on this here? Let's look at this one here. Is there a greatest common factor between these three here? Between 6x squared, x, and 12. Is there a greatest common factor between these sets of terms? Guys? Head up. 1. There's no other factors, right? So, we go to step 2. 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Then what's the next step? We need to find the sign. So we look at the sign of the constant term, and the constant term here is negative. So the signs are opposite. One's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. One is going to be positive, one is going to be negative. Factors of the first and third term. Well, we have 6x squared and 12. What do we know it'll be in the first spots? X and x, just whatever the variable is. X and x. Because that's the only way we can get x squared is x times x. Now I need to look at the factors of 6 and the factors of 12. Well, 6 would be 1 and then 2 and 3. How about 12? 2 and? So which factors of 6 do we want to try first? 1 and 6 or 2 and 3? 2 and 3. What factors of 12 do we want to use? 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. 3 and 4. Which one do we want to put first? 3 or 4 here? 2 and 4 would have a common factor. 2 and 4 have a common factor of 2. And as we said yesterday, I can't put, if there's not a common factor to begin with, there can't be a common factor in either one of these sets of parentheses. So I can't put 4 in here. Now let's check it. 2x times negative 4 would be negative 8x. Positive 3x times positive 3, or 3a times positive 3x is plus 9x. This gives us, is that what we wanted? That's it. That's the answer. That's it. So we got it on the first try. So sometimes this does work. Now looking at this here, because there can't be any common factors, yes? 1 and 6 and 1 and 12 would work only one way. But 2 and 3 in this one here, 1 and 12, would not work in either direction. Because 2 and 12 have a common factor of 2. 3 and 12 have a common factor of 3. So 2 and 3 and 1 and 12 would never work because they would always have a common factor no matter how we set it up. 2 and 3 and 2 and 6, those would always have a common factor, yes? This here only has 1. So doing this here, if it's hard to see that, that's fine. Because when you check it, it won't work. When you check it, it won't work. But the common factor, if it doesn't have 1 up here, it won't have 1 here, is just a way to kind of look at it and eliminate possibilities. It's just something that you'll start noticing over time, because if there had been a common factor in one of these here, we would factor it out. So we'd have a number out front, like we would when we factored the first one. But if it doesn't factor out of the beginning, it can't factor out of either one of these. So if that kind of hint and trick is helpful, use it. If it's not, ignore it, okay? Any questions on this here? Okay, let's look at this one here. Looking at this here, is there a greatest common factor? And I will tell you there is one. There's a specific one, but there is one. There is a specific one for our greatest common factor. I'm kind of phrasing it that way specifically. It is 1, but it's not going to be positive 1. It's going to be negative 1. Because what's going to happen is it's going to change the sign of everything inside. Because when I factor out a negative, if it was negative, it's now positive. And if it's positive, it's now negative. Because I want the value of a, because any of these here we're working with is ax squared plus bx plus c. The leading coefficient is a number in front of a variable with the highest exponent. So the highest exponent for this is 2. So then 4 is the leading coefficient. It's the value of a. I want it to be positive, because if it's positive, all of these steps here work. They work just fine. But if a is negative, it throws a wrench in it. It doesn't work as well. Really, we can say here, and make sure A is positive. Let me say by factoring out one if necessary. Now, if it worked out there was a greatest common factor of like 2, we'd factor out negative 2. We'd factor out the negative with it. Now, from here, we're going to do the exact same things. The steps won't change. All we really did was we made sure A was positive. We want the value of A to be positive. Now, all the rest of the steps are going to go the exact same as what we've already done. They're not going to change. So you can drop the 1 if you want, because writing -1 and just the negative in front of it are the same thing. But just be careful to make sure that you have that negative in your answer. It's going to need it. Now, the next thing we look at is, so that's steps 1 and 2. So step 3 is the sign. The sign of the constant term is negative, so the signs are opposite. Positive and a negative. Factors of 4x squared, well, we know the factors of x squared are and x. Factors of 4, 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. Well, 5 is 1 and 5, yes? 1 and 5. So do we want to use 1 and 4 or 2 and 2? 1 and 4. So let's check it. X times -5 is -5x. 1 times 4x is plus. This would give us -x. Is that what we wanted? No. Well, we're not even close, are we? -x, that's not even close. So switching the signs wouldn't do anything for us, because it would change it from -x to +x, yes? Because just switching the signs would just change the sign of our check. I would agree. I would switch out 4 and 1. Because if we switched it, we would have 4x times 5, which would be either 20 or -20. And then we'd either add or subtract 1, which would give us -19x or 19x. So it's a little too big. Now, if we check this here, 2x times -5 is -10x. 1 times 2x is plus 2x. So it gives us -8x. Yes? That's what we're looking for, right? -8x? Yes? No? Because again, we factored out the -1, yes? So again, whenever we factor something out, we're not looking at the original problem, because we're not factoring it. We're factoring this one without that scalar, without that number, without the number we factored out. So we need it to be positive. So what we can do is we can switch the signs. And when we switch the signs, we'll get 10x minus 2x, which gives us our positive 8x, what we want. Gives us our positive 8x. And that works anytime we factor a number out. We're not looking at the one that we started with. We're looking at the one with the number factored out. Questions on this here? Questions on this here? We good with this here? Okay, I'm going to do this one here. Have I changed the problem at all between the one I just wrote down and the one that's printed? We put W instead, yes? So some of the ones, we'll do it in W because the homework is not going to have just X. It's going to have W. It's going to have K. It's going to have different letters, but it doesn't matter. As long as the ones we're looking at are the same, 9W, negative 9W squared minus 3W plus 2, it will work. If we had, this here doesn't factor because W and X are not the same. Because if they're not the same letter, they're not the same variable. The only way that that would work is if we had somewhere off to the side saying X is equal to W squared. We have something defining what it is, and we've replaced it with. Otherwise, variables are not the same. Okay? We'll get into higher degree polynomial function and use something called U substitution. Don't worry about that now. But again, it's where we're replacing things. Now, looking at this here, is there a greatest common factor? Well, there's not a number like 2 or 3, but there is what? A negative 1. Which changes the sign of everything inside of the parentheses. So whenever you factor out a negative 1, if the number was positive, it's now negative. And if it was negative, it's now positive. You're switching the signs. You're switching the signs. And we factor out a negative 1. Now, it is possible to factor out like negative 2 if 2 was a common factor. So you'd factor out the 2 and switch the signs. If you have trouble doing that, really what you could do is in the calculator type the coefficients, the number in front of the variables. So you could do here negative 9 divided by negative 1. Negative 3 divided by negative 1. Do each one of those, and it will tell you what the number is for each of the individual spaces. Does that make sense? So even if it was a number, we could do the same thing. Now, that moves us on to step 2, or 2 sets of parentheses. Two sets of parentheses, 3 spots. Now we need to find the sign. The signs would be what? Opposite, because our constant term is negative. Now, we need to find the factors of the first and third term. So the factors of the first term would be, well, 9W squared, so I would have W and W for sure, yes? Well, factors of 9, 1 times 9 and 3 times 3. What do we want to use, 1 and 9 or 3 and 3? Let's try 3 and 3. Well, factors of 2 are 1 and 2. We've only got one set. So at this point here, we can go on and multiply through and check it. Well, 3W times negative 2 is negative 6W. 1 times 3W is plus 3W. Negative 6 plus 3 is negative 3W. Is that what we wanted? No, we wanted it to be positive, so we changed the signs. Because when we change the signs, we'll have 6W minus 3W, which will give us a positive 3W. And that's it there. Questions on this here? Questions on anything we've done so far? You good with this here? Now we have these two here. I'm going to we'll skip these and be done with this here, because I feel like most of y'all have got a good handle on this, yes? So, let's see here. We've got about 6 minutes left.